Ladies and gentlemen, today I would like to welcome Mr. And let me give you a drum roll here. Actually, the soundboard's loading, so give it a second. Is it working? Oh my gosh, we're having technical difficulties, guys. This is the worst. All right, well, it's failing me. The drum roll will probably go off in the middle of our conversation here in a second. Oh, there we go. It's going. Mr. Charles Healey. So, thank you while we worked out the technical difficulties again. But go ahead and tell me a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is Charles Healey. I am currently a student at Allen Hancock College. I am a fourth-generation family member in a ranching family, and my family has a ranch in Los Alamos currently, and currently I am studying fashion design and history at Allen Hancock. And of course, I just wrote a book.
Okay, awesome. And you know, you mentioned you're from a ranching family, and I almost want to give the request that you slide over to the side a tiny bit so your head just lines up with those horns. So you're just wearing the horns the whole time. That'd be so fun. There we go.
Oh my goodness.
Awesome. So fourth generation. So I grew up in Santa Barbara, and so I love the rich history of the area. And I know you wrote this book about Santa Rosa Island, but tell me a little bit about just your family history in the area.
Well, my family history started in, I would say, about the early 1900s because, well, my dad's family is ranching too, but they came from Nevada, and then my mom's family, her great-grandfather was from New York, and her great-grandmother was from Arizona, and our history as a family in Santa Barbara County started when my mom's family moved to the island in 1915, and from there we've been in the county since. And my dad's family came to the county in about the 50s, and we've been here ranching the whole time, ranching on Santa Rosa Island, and then my mom and dad, when they married, they've been ranching on the mainland. They had a ranch, or they leased a ranch in San Ynez for a good long time. Now we're leasing a ranch in Los Alamos. So we've been here since the early 1900s.
So I know this isn't necessarily about the topic of your book, but what does ranching in the modern day look like?
Well, ranching in the modern day, you have to take in consideration the trends and the values of the people and the customer base around you, because my family, we raise cattle for beef. And so, you know, everyone today is thinking about sustainability and a clean source of food. And so ranching has evolved to try and meet those demands. So I know we and other ranchers, when we're trying to sell cattle or sell beef, it's always about, like, you know, we're trying to make sure what we're producing is clean, is organic, is not harmful to the environment. And so we're really taking in consideration just what people's values are now.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. I know, for example, my wife and I, we always want to buy locally sourced meat instead of meat that was, you know, butchered in the Midwest and frozen and shipped out to us or whatever that is. So definitely appreciate that. Going back to something you said, though, more in lines with your book, you said that your mom's family lived on Santa Rosa Island. So I don't recall, are there still residences on Santa Rosa Island, or was that in the past?
The National Park Service has housing out there for their employees, but no one really truly lives on the island anymore. Campers can camp, and and the bunkhouse where the cowboys used to live is now used for, I want to say, UCSB for studying purposes. So really, no one lives on the island anymore.
Okay. And is the whole thing a national park, or is some of it privately owned?
Oh, no, it became a national park, the whole thing, in, I want to say, 1986.
Okay. Awesome. So, go into your book a little bit. Is this a photographic journal only, or do you have some, like, articles and some, like, captions about what you're showing off?
It's photographic and historical, so of course there's a bunch of photography because I'm guessing that a lot of the viewers and readers have probably never seen the island, and many outside the family have never seen the island used as a ranch, so of course I put a lot of photographs in there, but I also put a lot of historical context and information to use as background information or personal stories to give insight into the reader, so there's a balanced mix of the photography and actual history.
Mm-hmm. And are you the photographer, or did you just compile a bunch of other photographers' pictures?
Well, some of the pictures are mine. The pictures in a vertical frame are mine, and I took those from 2010 to 2020, but all the pictures older than that are from my parents, or from my grandparents, and my great-grandparents.
Okay. So all of it is in the family, though, is what you're saying?
Oh, yes. And I did use 2 to 3 pictures outside the family, but they were used from people that we know, like a local artist who went up there in the 90s. She took a beautiful picture of horses on the east side, and so I used a picture from her. And then I used 2 pictures from a local photographer named Bill Dewey. But all of the pictures that I used are from people that I know, so it's not, I'm not reaching from strangers.
Mm-hmm. Not just Googling the photos and pulling them off.
Oh, no.
Awesome. That's cool. So a little bit about the history of Santa Rosa Island. I'd like to get your take on just kind of like an overview of the history, because it sounds like that's something that's really important to you, and then maybe a couple of your favorite historical facts as well.
Well, I mean, it all depends. Do you want like history from the true beginning, or history from when my family and Vale and Vickers were out there, which that started in 1901, but the history of the whole island can go back to the Chumash. Like, which one are you asking about?
I would love to hear a little bit about the Chumash. And for those of you that don't know, we're talking about the Channel Islands off the coast of California. Specifically in the Santa Barbara area, there's like 7 or 8 or something like that, all kind of in a row that go down the coast. I want to say the southernmost one is Santa Catalina. I don't want to be quoted on that. And it goes all the way up, and then off the coast of Santa Barbara directly, there's like San Miguel and Santa Rosa and Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
I really don't remember.
I mean, from Point Conception, which is on the mainland, to LA, all 8 is San Miguel, Santa Rosa, which is, of course, about the book, Santa Cruz, Anacapa, Santa Barbara, San Clemente, San Nicolas, and then Catalina.
Okay. And so the Chumash, you're probably going to get into this a little bit, but they were the Native Americans that lived in the area, and they would get in these canoes, basically, and I'm sure there's a more appropriate word for them, and they would go out to the island. So, yeah, maybe we could start with a little bit of the deep history before we get into your family history.
Well, thousands of years ago, the Chumash did come to the island, and I do think they inhabited the island before they went to the mainland. And when you go out there, I don't know if all the artifacts are still out there, but I remember when I was little, being on the island, you would go out there and you would see mounds where their huts used to be. You used to find stone tools in certain areas, and they were out there for thousands of years. And then when 1542 came, Cabrillo, who was a Spanish conquistador, he came and discovered California and the Channel Islands, and the true point where the era of the island went from Chumash to Spanish was in the second half of the 1700s, when the Spanish were going through California and colonizing and inhabiting it and building all the missions of presidios. And the last Chumash left Santa Rosa and probably the other surrounding islands in the early 1800s. Last Chumash left Santa Rosa in 1817. And then in 1843, the island was made into a Mexican land grant by the current governor of Alta California at the time, and he gave it to the Carrillo family. And you probably heard the heard of the Creo family because they're
Yeah.
local, and there's so many places in Santa Barbara named after the Creos. And their era was from 1843 to 1859, and two Creo brothers were given the island, but after a month, they then gave it to two daughters of one of the brothers. Carlos Creo gave it to two daughters, and the two daughters then gave all the management to their American husbands, and it was Thompson and Jones that managed the island through the 1840s to the 1850s. And then in 1859, the island was completely bought by the Moore brothers. They were another local ranching family, pretty wealthy, and they had a lot of ranches throughout Santa Barbara County. And from 1859 to 1901, they had the island, and they used it as a sheep ranch. They had thousands of sheep on it at one time. And then in 1901, that's when the Valen Vickers and then my family comes into the play of it.
Okay, awesome. So one thing growing up, when you're living in Santa Barbara, Goleta area, where I grew up, you can look out and see the islands, and it doesn't seem to be much on them. So was there a lot more in the past and it all just died, or is there more than the naked eye can see? Or tell me a little bit about that.
I mean, well, it's hard to look at the islands and Santa Rosa from the mainland because when you look at it, it just looks like a flat silhouette. But when you go out there, there's so many fields and mountains and hills and canyons. They're actually really large. And, I mean, currently it's more, what's out there is more historical. All of the structures and what's out there is relics and not really being used as they used to be back in the day. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, what are some of your favorite historical facts? I know you just listed off a ton of stuff to me, but maybe in regards to your family or the history of the island.
Two of my favorite. Oh my goodness, you're really making me pick two.
If you can only come up with one, that's fine.
No, I can pick two. It's just trying to decide which two because there's so many. Okay.
You want to give me five? You can give me five.
Okay, let's just stick to two. We'll be here for hours if we do more. In 1915 is the year my family entered the island. So in 1901, Valen Vickers, which was a company comprised of two powerful cattlemen, they bought the island in 1901, and from 1901 to 1915, they had a superintendent, and what a superintendent does is they manage the island, and they're really hands-on. And his name was Frank Pepper, but in 1915, he ran into a family problem, so he had to leave the island. And, well, I mean, family problem, his wife killed herself out there in the big house, so he was distraught, and he quit, and that is the time when my great-grandfather went out there because at that time he was working at a ranch in Arizona in which the Vales owned, and they asked, hey, could you go out there and help out for a year and try and set up before we find a new foreman or a new superintendent to take over? And he promised, okay, I'll only help you for a year. So he went out there, and he was out there before that time. He would only go out for just weekends to help because he was also a captain, so if they needed any help with boats or with cattle, he'd go out for a short time. But this was the first time he was going to be out there for an extended period of time. And when he got there, he really decided that he loved the island, and he decided to make it his home. So he packed up everything in Arizona, and he packed up his wife, my great-grandmother Kuka, and their first son, Charlie Oscar, and then moved out there to the island, and they lived in the bunkhouse, and that's where all the cowboys lived, but they lived in this main cottage part of the area. And my grandfather was actually born on the island in the bunkhouse in 1918.
Okay, that's cool.
And and I'll give you another
go ahead.
second. I'm trying to decide another second historical topic. I guess another interesting piece would be from the 1940s to the early 60s, there used to be a military base on the south side of the island used in World War II and then just the early part of the Cold War. And There's still a stone bunker on the south side. There used to be buildings in where army members used to live, but they tore those down. But there's still a stone bunker on the hillside. And that's pretty interesting because not that many people know that there was a army base on there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't even know that. That's pretty cool. So obviously you're very passionate about the history of this island, and I guess my question would be, what inspires you about it, or why are you so passionate about it, and what do you hope the future of the island holds?
Well, I think the reason why I'm so passionate about it is because I do consider it my home and my family's home, because, we've been out there since the early 1900s, and we all consider our home. Many of my family members, my great-grandparents and my grandfather lived out there, and of course that's where we all went for our vacations, and it's where we were all raised. My grandfather was raised out there, my mom and her brother were raised out there during their vacations, and so were my dad, and I went out there during my vacations, and there's just such a personal tie within all of us, and we just love the island so much, and I just don't want any of the history to be forgotten, because with places like Santa Rosa, with such isolated and secret places, their histories do tend to die if you don't talk about them or preserve them, because not that many people know about those places or have ever been to them, and so I just really want the history of the ranching, which many people don't know, to just be preserved and be protected so it never gets forgotten.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. So let's talk a little bit about your publisher. How'd you get hooked up with Polyverse?
Well, my publisher, Louis Torres, it was kind of by chance, really. It was last year in 2022, I already had the book designed and planned because I was planning to do a book, but I got to this point where I was just stuck thinking, well, how do I make it and how do I get it published and printed? And one day I picked up the San Ynez Valley Star, a local newspaper, and there was this article on a local publisher company and a local publisher, my current publisher, and I was like, that was very interesting and very lucky. So there was an email on the article, so I contacted Louis, and he got interested right off the bat, and we started talking from day one, and here we are. It's really by luck, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's cool that you can have a book that is about rich local history and have it picked up by a local publisher. So I definitely appreciate the route you went on that one. Well, kind of wrapping it up here, any final comments that you have about the book or anything you want to say about yourself?
If anyone's listening is curious about the book, I would say it is just such a great find, because even if you're not a big historical reader, just looking at all the photography is just beautiful, and it's just so, the pictures are just beautiful because it's places that people have never really seen, and historical events in which have not really been talked about, and so I would say get it if you're interested in ranching or history or just beauty. And on March 22nd, of Chaucer's bookstore in Santa Barbara?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on March 22nd from 6 to 7 p.m. I will be doing a signing in store.
Okay. Well, you heard it here first. Local celebrity. He's going to be at Chaucer's. And he'll be selling his book and signing. All right, Charles. Well, maybe after this podcast you'll be local celebrity, up and coming. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I'll chat to you again sometime.
Thank you.
Cool. Well...